everybody, and welcome to Gen Friends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson-Passy from Carolina Girl Genealogy. And as usual, I have a fabulous panel and a wonderful guest. We are excited to get started today. Let me introduce my panel. We've got Bernice Bennett. Bernice is back in the house. Woohoo! From JB Roots. Hi, Bernice.
Hello, everybody.
It's been a while. I'm so glad you're here. Yay. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks. We've got Melissa Barker, whom we always are so excited is here, our archive lady. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for coming.
Great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Glad you're here. We've got Jenny Hawran from Like Herding Cats Genealogy. We're so glad you're here too. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you bet.
And last, but of course not least, is Mary Kircher Roddy from MKR Genealogy and from the Applied Genealogy Institute. So, check out that. We've got her links in there so you can check out the courses that are going on there.
Yeah, registration's coming up. I think
registration's coming up. So yeah. If you hear banging in the background, it's my dog. I didn't kick her out. So she's just walking around scratching her hind leg, and it's banging on my floor. So nothing terrible is going on in my house. It's just my dog, if you hear it. But our special guest tonight, we're so glad you're here, Brian, is Brian Rhinehart. And he's got his little thing up on his chiclet from civilwarrecords.com. Thank you for coming, Brian.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. This sounds fun, just sitting around talking about genealogy for an hour.
Exactly. Exactly.
We have so much fun.
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of fun. So you actually will go to the National Archives and pull records for people. So this is fabulous. But, as a South Carolina girl, our records aren't there. Our Civil War records are in this state. Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then I'll respond to that.
Good, because I'm hoping that you're going to tell me, yes, but.
Well, I want to, when you say your records aren't there, maybe you need to just define what you mean, because there are records for South Carolina there. Assuming you mean Civil War, right?
That's what I mean. I mean the pension records and things. I get so jealous because all these Northerners will come up with this thick
Yankees.
The Yankees have the big, huge, thick, and I've got like 2 pages.
All the Union Army and Navy, all that Civil War stuff for the Union is at the National Archives, but Confederate records, there are some, but it's not the records that people are looking for. And it's like, just random things here and there. There aren't a whole lot of things that really survived that made its way down to the National Archives. But you're right. If you're looking for a Confederate pension, you're going to have to check the state archives.
Exactly. And so when you hear, like I said, when you hear all these stories that he's going to tell us, don't get all excited if you've got a Confederate soldier.
The thing is, you can get records from other wars, Spanish American,
absolutely.
War, federal land records, those are all there. So South Carolina is represented.
Yes, it is.
Maybe not in the Civil War. So.
Now, do you pull records other than Civil War? Will you pull anything?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
My website name, you can see civilwarrecords.com. Yes. That's the war that gets everybody's attention.
Right.
Everybody, the War of 1812 is cool and all, but there's not a lot of really big enthusiasts about the War of 1812. So I went with the website name that catches attention, but I work with a lot of records that don't have to do with the Civil War that are there at the National Archives as well.
And my genealogy research, I like to, because I research my family and my husband's family. And I like to say that when it comes to the Civil War, all of his records are here in Tennessee, and all of my records are with Brian at the National Archives. Because all my family's from up north, and his is all from the south. So
that's too funny. So we will have the link to your website in our underneath the video, and also in the blog post that comes out. So everybody will be able to find you from that link. So I'm just going to turn it over, you guys, for your questions.
Before we do questions, I just want to say we also need to follow his social media channel.
Oh, absolutely.
The reason being is because he will post what he finds.
Yes.
And that's what I can't wait to see.
Yeah, exactly. Now you've just spent a week there, right?
I spent the day. It's Monday, so I haven't finished.
Oh, you're going to be there for the whole week. Oh,
yeah, but I spent the day there, so I'll be there. Going to be there the rest of the week as well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How nice is that? Just to say, I'm going to be at the National Archives for the whole week.
I know. And you know what? This is GenFed week as well.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
The Genealogical Institute of Federal Records, I think that's what it stands for. But that's going on this week. It's an institute that takes place on site at the archives.
Yeah.
And I'm not involved in that, but I like being there for that week because I see a lot of familiar faces that
Oh,
are
I'll
there,
bet you
students and
do. Yeah.
some of the teachers, and it's kind of cool. I always make a point to be there during GenFed week.
All right. Who's got questions? Oh, Jenny.
I got just a practical question. I told you before we started recording, my daughter works for the National Archives in College Park. And I'm curious what your take is on how things are going since the pandemic, because that was a big thing about records being not accessible and not open to the public. And are things back to normal? What did you do during that time? This is what you do. What'd you do for 2 years?
That's a good question, because like most of us, when things shut down, we're like, all right, in 2 months, we're going to be back to normal. We're going to get back to work. None of us had any idea this would be going on.
Right.
The archives were closed for about 2 years for the
Yeah.
most part. And if I had known it was going to be 2 years, I may have tried to be a little more productive, because I didn't realize, like I said, if you're going to have 2 years of downtime, I still promoted the business. I still took orders and just put people on a waiting list, which meant when they reopened, I had a massive amount of work to do.
Yes.
But I also was eligible for that pandemic unemployment. So I was still getting money from the government as unemployment, because I am a registered business. So I was eligible for that.
Yeah.
So I made the best of it, but like most people, it was a rough couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But how are things going, you asked? Things are pretty much back to normal there at the archives. They were requiring that you schedule appointments for a while. They just recently dropped that.
Oh,
You
that's
don't
good
need
to know.
appointments anymore. They were doing social distancing, but they're not doing that anymore. I don't think there's really much of anything different now because of COVID that is still in place. I think it's pretty much back to normal.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Brian, because I've
Okay.
seen you over the years at the National Archives. So give us an idea of the breakdown of records that you have scanned for people. From a
Geez, how much time do you
percentage
have?
perspective. Yeah, I mean, I know you're there all the time.
Yeah.
But what's your biggest
So,
record group?
well, like I was saying a couple of minutes ago, civilwarrecords.com, people come to me mostly with Civil War requests. And so there are 3 records that I mainly work with when it comes to Civil War soldiers. When someone emails me and says, I have this soldier, what's even at the archives that you can get from me? It's 3 records that I usually suggest to start with. Civil War pension files. Most soldiers got pensions, not all, but most of them got pensions. Those are going to be, on average, those are about 100 pages long. Some are much smaller, some are enormous. I had one a couple months ago that was over 1,000 pages long.
Holy cow.
By far the biggest one I've ever had.
Wow.
Is that the one that you had the contest? Is that the one you had the contest?
You're right. I put that on Facebook that morning and said, I'm working today on this file. And I took a picture of the 5 envelopes that it was in.
Yeah.
Said it's a massive file. How many pages do you think it's going to be? And by the end of the day, whoever guessed closest, I'll give you like a gift certificate to use on my website to put an order. And so it ended up being like 1,073 pages, I think.
Good.
So
Wow.
it was enormous. Yeah.
The
But
lucky family that got that one.
Yeah, I was in contact with the client, letting him know this is a big file, so be prepared. So the pension file, the reason those are so big and so useful is because the soldier or the widow or the minor children, whatever, would have to confirm that what they're saying was true. So let's say that there was a widow and she said, I was married to this soldier. he served in this unit for this long. He died. He left me with 3 young children under the age of 16. So I'm eligible for a pension. Well, the Pension Bureau is not just going to be like, okay, here you go. Since you said so, we'll give it to you. No, there needs to be verification that the soldier even served in the war, verification that he died, verification that they were married, verification that the children that she's claiming are under 16 really are that age.
Mm-hmm.
So for genealogy purposes, you can imagine that's like a gold mine of information in that pension file. Plus, you get a lot of affidavits from neighbors, fellow soldiers, and you look at the names of some of those affidavits of the witnesses, they don't tell you straight up who they are sometimes, but that could be a cousin.
Sure.
That could be the neighbor he grew up with in his neighborhood. You need to research all those people as well, and you've got all kinds of clues right in that file. So the pension file, I always recommend you get that pension file if it exists, no matter what, because you never know what you're going to get in there. The second record group is the compiled military service records.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the long rectangular cards. You may have seen those before. And they detail every other month, they detail what the soldier was doing, where he was he promoted, was he transferred, was he killed, did he desert, was he injured, was he in the hospital?
Yes. Yeah.
You name it, you're going to get details like that. You might get his enlistment papers inside of there. If he was captured and held as prisoner of war, there's usually documentation about that. Any number of things that you can get inside of those service records. And then the third record group is the carded medical records. If you're looking to get the complete story of your Civil War soldier's service, I would suggest getting the carded medical records. They don't typically have a lot of genealogical information in there, but I have seen exceptions. So it's worth getting. But you're going to get information like if he was hospitalized, when he was hospitalized, where he was hospitalized, why was he hospitalized? Was he shot? Was he, I have an ancestor who was in the hospital for sunstroke.
Oh,
And
wow.
so by getting those medical cards, he had a rough time in the war, but I know that that was part of his story. And as genealogists, we're always looking to tell our ancestors' story. So those are valuable records to get as well.
Yeah.
So that's an overview of the Civil War records that I pulled usually. But your question was very broad. And I mean, I pulled records for the War of 1812, and I was working with a lot of court-martial records today, bounty land records. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of stuff there.
Let me ask you a quick question about those medical records. So I've got a Confederate soldier who his card, because you can get those compiled service record cards for the South, for the Southern soldiers. And it says that he was in the hospital and that he died after for injuries that he suffered at Cold Harbor. And it says he was in the hospital, the Confederate hospital in Virginia. Are there records for those hospitals where could I find those records? If they
I don't know for sure. I
Okay.
don't know for sure, but I would say if you've got a record in that service record that says that, they got that from somewhere.
Okay.
There was a record somewhere that they got that from, that they put that in there.
Okay.
Because the word compiled military service record, they took all these records, the hospital records and prisoner of war records and muster rolls, enlistments, compiled them all into one packet. It's sort of a transcription of what all those records are saying.
Right.
So they had to have gotten that from somewhere. So that record probably exists
somewhere.
It's probably at the National Archives, because that's where they did all this
Yeah.
compiling out, I think. Or maybe they did it I think they did it in the Pension Bureau, but it's records that were in the War Department that usually are at the National
So I
Archives.
might have some information on a soldier there that I
Did you say Cold Harbor?
Yeah, did you have somebody that
That's where my guy, I was telling Cheri about this earlier today, and
Oh, that's
Brian
so
helped
funny.
me when I was at the National Archives a few years ago. I had 2 brothers that fought, and the family story was a little off. It said that one was killed and one was injured at this battle, but really it was that battle. It was a different thing, but they both were different units in the same one. And it was Cold Harbor. And Thomas died, and his brother had his finger shot off. And the brother, survived the war and got a pension.
Mhm.
But Thomas did not get a pension.
So
He-
we had
he died in the
people
war.
there. Yeah, we had people
Yeah.
there on opposite sides.
Yeah. And Brian, when I was there, said, "Oh, you should go talk to this guy downstairs." And I was able to get the hospital registers and
Yeah.
look at those
Yeah.
and see. It basically, there were so many men killed. It was pretty much just
Yeah.
a list of
Yeah.
names. They were
Yeah.
lucky to get the names down, I think, on the piece of
Yeah.
paper.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of interesting that we had, because I had more than one soldier fight at Cold Harbor. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of interesting that one came home and the other ended up dying at the hospital. So isn't that weird how history,
Yeah.
connect like that? The same
And
battle.
Brian is so, right about, getting the files and the stories in the files.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
mean, my blog is called Searching for Stories. I just love stories, and there can be so many stories in a pension
Yes.
file.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially when you
and
have that many pages, not the 4 that I get, and
yeah,
I don't even know, because like they'll say, when were you married? Oh, she writes it down. I mean, there's only 2 witnesses. There's nothing else. I guess they just believed her because they'd known her all her life. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know, because there's
Well,
no other records, at least with the South Carolina ones that I have found. That's it. It's just the information that she filled out. And I don't know if you find the same thing for Tennessee, or do you get more, Melissa?
Oh, I've gotten some fantastic files from Tennessee. But I've
Oh.
also gotten some fantastic files from the Union as well.
Mhm.
I have one of my husband's ancestors that his widow, she had actually been married to more than one Civil War soldier. And so she would file on all of their services. And so she had a very large widow's pension, and inside there were all of her marriage records,
Oh my
even
gosh.
to the men that were not Civil War soldiers.
Oh, wow.
And if they ended in divorce, or if they died, there was a death certificate. I mean, it was just on and on and on. And so that was a great file. But I've also got some pretty good Tennessee, some
Have you?
files. Yeah.
Yeah, I think South Carolina was just so decimated, after the Civil War, that they really didn't have much left of anything.
South Carolina is the only state that did not send soldiers to the Union Army, except for
Yeah,
U.S. colored troops.
yeah,
Every state organized a
Yep.
Union regiment,
Yep.
called it like
Yeah.
the 1st Alabama, the 1st
Yeah.
Georgia Infantry.
exactly.
South Carolina is the only one that did not organize a Union regiment,
Yep.
aside from the U.S. colored troops.
Yep. That tells
And I'm
you
so glad you
something.
brought up the U.S. colored troops, because one of the things that I'm doing in my archives, our county wasn't formed until 1871. But we have African Americans who actually settled or were born here, but before the county was formed. And so we are trying to document now their service in the U.S. colored troops. And right now we've been able to document 6 that either were born here, lived here, died here. And part of that is getting their service and pension files, which have been amazing, actually. So
Yeah, you get firsthand
yeah,
stories from these people, where they
yes.
say, I was born 1842 on this plantation,
Mhm.
and that you get all those details that, if you're ever researching anybody that goes back into slavery, some of those details can be difficult, if not impossible to
Yeah.
find, but
Yeah.
you're going to get in their own words
Yeah.
where they came from.
If I won the lottery, I think what I would do is I would just order pension files just to read them.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they're just so fascinating. I don't know how you get your work done. I mean, I know it's your business and you get paid, but once I would get into one of those files, I would just be there for hours just reading.
I have one that I got today. I want to tell you the story at some point, but there was a
Yeah.
very interesting pension file I scanned earlier today too.
Well,
But
tell us
Bernice, were
about
you
it.
going to say
Before
something?
you tell us,
Yes, I
I
was
think
gonna
Bernice,
ask
yeah,
you
Bernice wanted to
if-
say something. Yeah.
If you have found any photos in your
Mhm.
files.
Yes, I have.
Oh,
That's one of my number one questions I get from people. They're like, can you get his Civil War record, and can you give me a photo of him too? And I'm like, probably not. I give presentations on Civil War records, and I talk about this question, and I compare it to the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where they really wanted the golden ticket.
Yeah.
So Veruca Salt got her dad to buy all those boxes of candy bars. And they just opened up these candy bars day and night for days and days.
Yeah.
They finally found the golden ticket. Take that same concept. If you open up enough pension files, you're going to get a photo, but it's kind of like finding a golden ticket. Yeah, the government and the military did not have time or money to put into doing these. And if there is a photo, it's probably not going to be of him in uniform. It's probably taken because they need to do some sort of investigation on the guy.
IDM,
I found photos of U.S. color troop soldiers, but usually it's because the government was giving them a hard time, saying, "We don't believe you were actually in the war." So they took a photo of him, went down and tracked down all the soldiers he claimed to serve with, and said, "Do you recognize this guy?"
Yeah.
So because of that, it's unfortunate they gave him such a hard time. But today, looking at that file, there's a photo of him in there now.
Exactly.
So
you found a photograph the other day when you posted on social media, I think. I don't remember which file it was, but I remember you posting it.
I did find a photo last week, but I haven't posted it yet because I want to deliver it to the client first. So
I was thinking I saw one. Okay.
Maybe I'm trying to think. Some of my posts are timed out like weeks in advance, and so I'm trying to think what just made its way onto Facebook. It's quite possible, but so yeah, I find it occasionally.
You did just post, because we just had the Olympics. You just posted about pulling a record for one of our Olympians.
Yes. So Gabby Douglas, the Olympian.
Yeah.
So the backstory on that, the story is not as exciting as you might think it might be. But what happened was I got a request to pull the Civil War pension file, and I'm like, sure. And they didn't tell me why. I'm like, I just put it on my list of orders, delivered it to the client. That was in June. And so just a week or two ago, I got an email thanking me for that file and said, you might be interested to know what we did with it. And it was a Civil War pension file for a U.S. colored troop soldier that was the ancestor of the Olympian Gabby Douglas. And they were doing, it's like a 10-minute video, maybe not even that long, about her discovering her family history. And they talked a lot about that Civil War soldier that we got records for. And I was like, that's so cool. I had no idea that's what I was doing. It just was like a normal day at work for me. But it turns out that it was for, it was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So
That's
cool.
very cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, you have some records you wanted to show us, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I've got several I can show you, and these are all things that I found today.
Today.
I know. Yes.
You've got a great job.
So I worked on a couple of Civil War pension files for clients. They asked me to digitize them for them. There was one that was 340 pages long, which is not unheard of, but it's larger than normal. And I couldn't help but kind of get invested in the story of why this file was so big. I haven't delivered it to the client yet, so I'm not going to use last names of the soldiers.
Yes.
I don't want to ruin the story. But so there was a Civil War soldier named Henry, and he was getting a pension on his own behalf because he got shot during the war. So he was eligible for an invalid pension. There was a pension law passed in 1899 that said, if you are the wife of a soldier, the soldier's still alive, but he deserted you as a husband, you are eligible to get half of that pension money. So there was a woman that came forward and said, I'm eligible for this because I was married to him and he left me. And so the government started, paying her pension benefits. Well, the second lady came around and said, this is not right. I'm his wife. He left her a long time ago. That marriage is long over. I'm his wife. And if anybody should be going on record as being the wife, it should be me.
I love it.
Someday that soldier's going to die and he's going to get widow's. Someone's going to get that widow's pension. So that needs to be me because I'm his wife. So there was this big back and forth over who the real wife was. And he really did leave her. But they were saying it was not they never actually officially divorced. And so because they never filed for a divorce, that second marriage was considered completely invalid.
Wow.
So she was completely out of the picture. She kept filing stuff, and they kept writing back and said, we have no right, you have no right to claim this. You're not the legal wife.
Wow.
His first wife is. And you said I could share my screen. I want to show you something here, because he actually, hang on, let me find it real quick here. You could tell the anger in the people's voices as they were getting more and more impatient. And he actually goes in detail as to why. Okay, you see that?
It's coming. Yep, we can see it.
Okay. This is his own words. The reason I left the woman, Callie, claiming to be my wife, is for infidelity. Came to my home in 1884, found a man by the name of Jones in our bedroom together. I said he had to leave, and she said, if anybody left, it could be you. So I took her at her word and left, and I have not been back since.
Oh my
And
God.
that's why I left her. And so you're getting all this dirt on this family of like, oh my God, he even named names, Jones. So yeah. So he's like, she told me if anybody had to leave, it's me. So he did. He just left.
Oh,
And
wow.
apparently never filed for a divorce on the way out.
Yeah.
So that wife got all of his pension benefits.
Wow.
And yeah. And Rebecca was not happy. I mean, it was just a mess. But
Yeah.
because of that, it was a really interesting file
Yes.
to read.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And you know, people were the same back then as they are today.
Oh,
So,
nothing changes. Nothing
except for
changes.
today,
You're
they
right.
probably would have gotten the divorce, but back then they thought, who cares? Nobody's ever going to know where I am or
Yeah.
what I'm doing anyway, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He even officially married that second girl, and they have a marriage certificate in the file, but they didn't accept it.
Gosh. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have
So
a question.
Yeah.
So there are sometimes so many documents in a file. When somebody gets, I don't know, 160-page pension file, what is your recommendation as to what they should do with it, how they should go about processing it, analyzing it, whatever?
That would be up to the individual. I would say read through it, obviously. Take notes, because that story I just told you, I didn't take notes on, because there were a lot of, I didn't even tell you the whole story, but the dates that are in there make it, the timeline of who was married to when at what point. So those kind of things can be useful. You might want to read it for genealogical value. You might want to read it for, the historical context. You might want to read it and pay attention to the people making the affidavits, the witness statements. So there's a lot of ways to read through those and process them.
Yeah.
I'd say part of it would be on your purpose for reading through it.
Yeah.
Is it for
I can tell you-
genealogy? Is it?
I was going to say, Mary, that because I've gotten several, what I usually do is I put them in chronological order as best I can, because sometimes they don't have dates on them, believe it or not. But because the reason I do that is because a lot of times with the affidavits, especially, or the correspondence, it's a back and forth.
Yeah.
And so if you're lucky enough to get that, and so I'll put all those in chronological order. That way I can follow the story as like, this letter, and then this was the response to that letter, and then this is response to that letter, and then this affidavit was done on this month and this year, and then this affidavit. And it's funny to read it that way, because then things change, or you can catch variations in the story that have changed. But that's when I get a file, one of the first things I do is I scan it as it is, as I get it, if it's not already digital, and then I put it in chronological order.
Yeah, I agree with you, Melissa. One of the things that I have noticed in going there is that those files are never in order. And you can't put them in order when you're at the National Archives. They want you to scan them just the way you find them.
Yeah.
So it's necessary to go back, go through them, and put them in chronological order so that you could follow what's going on.
Yeah.
And really understand it. What I have found, though, which is interesting, is that when some people request a file, they only want certain types of information out of a file. Now, they may have a 200 to 300 page file, but what they want is, who did he marry? Little basic stuff. And I'll have to say, wait a minute, you need to go through this entire file. You're missing information when you only pick out just a little piece of it, because you may miss so much more. And that's just my bias, but that's the way I talk to people about what's important for them to gain from a file like that. That's an ancestor being a good ancestor. When they leave that
exactly, exactly. And hey, Laura's joined us. Hi, Laura. Glad you were able to pop in. And I was going to say, I know when I get any kind of file, not that I get these Civil War pension files, but when I get a big file, I will read them several different times. And one time might be for the genealogical data in them. And then the next time I'm looking for, you know, different things each time, historical context, just to make sure that I'm not missing, you know, read it specifically for a certain thing, just to make sure, you know, so several times go over it and over and over it. So, but Laura, do you have any questions for Brian?
I don't want to pop in and mess up all your flow. I don't know what y'all have already asked. I'm a big fan of what you do, though. So
he was showing us. Yeah, he's been showing us.
I don't. Oh, I guess I do have a question. Y'all may have asked you this. What do you think is the biggest misconception that researchers have about what are they going to find in Civil War records?
Oh,
okay. Yeah, we haven't asked that yet.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, that's a good question. I think the biggest misconception is I think these pensions are talked up so much that people feel like they're going to open it up and they're going to find the family tree written out in there and it's already done for you. And there are times I actually literally found a family tree kind of thing in at one point that they submitted because they needed to verify birth dates and all that.
Gosh.
That's very, very, very rare. People expect they read through it and they'll ask me like, this was interesting, but he never named his parents. Like, you're right, he didn't name his parents. They weren't required to leave his parents' names in there. And so I think they expect more than what's really going to be in there. I did mention this a couple of minutes ago, but sometimes what you have to do though is follow the clues. It may not be spelled out for you, but if you pay attention, I have pension files on my own family where it's an affidavit given by somebody. I'm like, who is this guy? And I look into it and realize that's his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a new family line to follow. Those clues can be in there. You just got to know what to look for and how to follow them. Yeah. So I think that might be one of the biggest misconceptions is they expect it to be easier than it might be.
You know, if Shelley had been able to join us tonight, she would have said what you were saying, Brian. And she always says, you look at a record, read through it, and then go, so what? Where does this lead me? So that's what she would agreed, and that's what she would have said.
My husband's third great grandfather was named Jesse Glasgow, and he lived in Tennessee his entire life. He was in the Civil War. In his late 50s, he joined an Illinois regiment, the 83rd Illinois. We live about 20 minutes from Battle of Fort Donelson, and he lived about 20 minutes from there too. But it was interesting, his pension file, in his pension file, they asked him to list all of his children and their birth dates.
Oh my goodness.
And he did. And so that was a great treasure trove, although I already knew them, but it was great to have it in writing.
Oh yeah. Oh, and that's, you know, pretty much firsthand knowledge, unless he'd forgotten the birth date, you know, I mean, that's as close as you're going to get.
Yeah.
You're not
I used that birth date of a kid in a file that proved identity. The guy changed his name, but he kept the same birth date.
Yeah.
So December 13th, 1888. There you are, Charles.
Well, Laura, Brian's been showing us some of the records that he's found just today. So what else you got for us?
Yeah. Okay. So I was looking at court-martial records today as well.
Cool.
There was another client who asked me to pull this court-martial record for her. I'm like, sure. Most court-martials are like 20 pages average. You know, you don't occasionally find bigger ones. So I said, let me look at it and I'll tell you like how much it might cost for me to do this.
Yeah.
I pulled it a couple months ago and it was massive. It's like 6 boxes. They had to wheel it out on a cart to me. And I'm like, wait, this is not what I signed up for. And so I ran by her and she's like, that's fine. I still want the whole thing.
Yeah,
And
that would be
so
me.
Yeah, me
started
too.
work, I started working on that today, and I got about 600 pages in, put the first box away, and thought, I have 5 more boxes to go. I'm going to get burned out. So I'm going to keep working on it tomorrow. But it was close to 600 pages in the first box. And so,
Wow.
but it was a very interesting file as well. It was an officer in the early 1900s who apparently had a really wild night. He got drunk one night and started acting out very inappropriately towards some of the ladies that are in the area. And
Oh dear.
he was an officer, and it was, conduct unbecoming to an officer.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know I didn't read every page of it, but from scanning through it, a lot of interviews with people who were around some of the ladies that were supposedly taken advantage of. And then there was another envelope where it turns out that he realized that one of the officers knew what happened and was going to, file these charges. So he started making motions to get this officer dismissed. And so then there's an investigation into like, you're trying to get these witnesses, out of the
witness.
Yes. So now there's, investigation into that. So I don't know what's waiting for me in the other boxes, but it's really interesting files.
Yeah.
I pulled a couple other boxes. I just wanted to find some interesting court martials because I haven't had a chance to look through those very much. I was looking through court martials from 1815 today. And that's during the War of 1812.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was there was this one particular regiment where several of the men deserted. And they were found guilty of deserting. And the officer, the judge that was in charge of sentencing, apparently was really into shaming people when they were found guilty.
Wow.
So reading through these, there were several cases where the sentence was that the soldier had to have his head shaved. They took soot from this oil lamp and told them they had to rub it all over their face, blacken their face, shave their head, and march in front of the whole regiment that way. There were several soldiers who got that sentence.
Oh, wow.
Some of the soldiers were told to shave half their head, and that was their sentence, to embarrass them. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Then I found one that's even worse than that. So I'm going to share my screen because
Okay. Right.
this was
We're a G-rated show now.
he says,
Okay, how's it
wait,
coming?
Here it is. Yeah, he had to forfeit half of his pay, hard labor. He had to have the letter D pretty much tattooed on his right buttock in India ink.
Oh,
that was his punishment for deserting. Like, are you serious? Like, I didn't even know that kind of thing happened in the war, but
yeah,
apparently it did.
Apparently it did. Oh my God.
My husband had a third great grandfather and 2 of his sons. They were in the same Union regiment together. And I can't remember, Brian, if you got me these files or not, but I got some of these types of files. They had deserted. All 3 went on the same day. And when they were captured, they had pay taken away, and then they had to do hard labor with a ball and chain, and then they could only eat bread and water for like 3 months. Yeah.
Oh
but then when they went through all that, they went back to their regiment, and then they got pensions later. But I guess
Civil War?
Yeah, Civil War.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Some of these people, you get them in charge and you wonder, what happened to them when they were a kid?
Yeah.
Like
seriously, yes.
When they get yeah.
Yes. The guy that tattoo thing, if you read on in the file, he appealed that and won. Because he said, the reason I deserted was my father just died and I inherited a large plot of land. And basically, if he didn't go home and take care of it, it was going to go into foreclosure. So he had to go home and take care of all that. So he didn't lose the land. He did that, and he said he came right back, turned himself into his officer, explain what happened. And the judge took that into consideration, and
Oh, that's good.
he did not have to get tattooed after all.
Oh,
So,
good.
yes.
But he had land, so that's telling you, so what, go look for that land record if that's your ancestor.
That's true. Yeah, it gives you another clue to follow. Very good. Yeah. So those were very interesting to read through, some of those, 200-year-old punishments that
Wow.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. Oh, that's something. Jenny.
I would think, you would also come across some really tragic stories
Yeah.
that maybe have stayed with you. I'd be curious if you had any, I mean, you've been doing this for such a long time, are there any stories that you just can't stop thinking
Yes,
about?
you know what stands out to me is I stumbled on this by accident. I was looking at what's called the casualty lists for regiments, where after the battles they would write up, these are the people that were killed or injured or
Mhm,
captured,
mhm.
or at the end of the battle, this is who are missing and this is why. And I was looking at a Wisconsin regiment, and there was a whole group of men that were killed in battle, which that's definitely tragic. But when I saw the date on it, it really, it's kind of a sad story. The date on there was April 9th, 1865, which, if you know Civil War history, that's
Yes.
the date that Grant and Lee met and the surrender happened,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
it was the beginning of the end of the Civil War. It's not
Mhm.
like it's like, okay, the war's over today,
Right.
but
Right.
it basically was. It really, the war basically ended that day.
Yeah.
So these guys, I researched some of their stories, and some of these guys had been in the service for a couple of years to be killed on the last day.
On the last day.
And
Yeah.
you just have to think, like, I wonder what story made it home first, that the war was over or
Yeah.
that their loved one was killed.
Yes. Yes.
Were they all excited, like, oh my gosh, the war's over, the
Yeah.
dad's coming home, and
Yeah.
the next day you get notice that he was killed on that same day.
Yeah.
So
Oh, it's tragic. Yes.
yeah.
Oh, that was a good question, Jenny. I like that question. That's good. Oh, so much good.
I did a little
Yeah.
blog post about those, actually. You can read
Yeah.
about it on my website.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Great.
stories are really what must compel you to keep doing this too, because it's just you get pulled right into all of
Yeah.
them, right? I would imagine.
Yeah.
I view all these records through a genealogy mindset. That's just
Mhm.
how that's the part that I'm really interested in. So yeah, when I see a really interesting story, I'm like, I wonder if these descendants know that this story is in writing here at the archives. They probably have no idea.
No
Right.
idea. No
Right.
idea.
Right.
Oh,
Mm.
you do such a good service for people. I mean, we can't all go besides Bernice, we can't all go to the archives because Bernice lives nearby. It's a long trip, and you gotta, stay in a hotel and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's fun to go and do your own research, but it's wonderful to be able to have people go do it for you who know what they're doing, can find the record probably a lot faster than you can. Never been there.
I got lucky. I stumbled into
Yeah.
this, and I'm riding with it. It's been fun.
Oh, yeah, and then get it scanned and sent to you, and sometimes that's how we have to do our research, is by finding somebody in a location because it's cheaper, to do it that way. So, this has been
Brian, when you get
yeah.
the
Oh.
records brought to you, of course, I'm an archivist, so I'm thinking about how they're brought to you.
Mhm.
You're not given just like the particular. Are you given the particular cases that you've requested, or do you get a box with that case and other cases in it?
It depends which file you request. If I request a pension file, I get an envelope with just that soldier's pension.
Okay, because I was wondering
The
if maybe
service
you would look
records,
at other ones while you were, just to look at
no,
them.
no. Service records, they'll bring you just a packet of that soldier's service record. Land records, they're going to give you a box, and you got to look for your document number. There's probably 100 other land files in there. You have to go through there and find, that homestead file or that bounty land warrant or whatever. So it varies.
And can you tell when you open up a envelope or however it's brought to you that this hasn't been touched since 1890s?
Sometimes you can tell because when you're taking the pages apart, they kind of stick together a little bit,
Yeah.
and like this is probably one that no one has ever touched.
Yeah.
So because the pages are perfectly lined up,
Yes.
I mean, you can tell, like, this is one that nobody has touched.
And that,
Yeah.
I know when I find records like that, just in our local archives, it just gives me chills to think nobody has touched this record
Yeah.
in so long, it just gives
Yeah.
me chills. It really
That
does.
hospital register
Mhm.
that I got, it was tied up with a ribbon, and I don't
Oh.
think it had probably been touched since
Yeah.
1870 something. My hands were black by the
Yeah.
time I was done
Yeah.
looking at it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Laura.
Brian, thank you for your response today. I was just looking, my husband has ancestors who were in the Civil War from Michigan, and they both came
Okay.
home. And the younger, it was father son, the younger one came home, and he was alive for a few days, but then died from his injury, and he died in May. He came home in May. So now I'm thinking,
Okay.
I want to research and see exactly which day he was injured, because that could
Yeah.
be significant.
Oh,
And
yeah.
his father was 71.
Oh,
They came
wow.
home and they both died the same year. His father died of something
Yeah.
completely different, but
Oh,
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
you
look
should look
that
into
up.
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
Did you bring any other records for us to look at, or was that?
Do I have any more records to look
Yeah,
at?
did you have any more that you wanted to share with us?
You know what? I
And it's
I have
fine if
one
you
that
don't.
doesn't, I do. I have one that's like not necessarily like an amazing story, but it's a record that not a whole lot of people have seen before.
Uh-huh.
Um,
That's good. That's good for
let me
us.
show you. Bonus points if anybody knows what you're looking at right here.
Let's see. Trying to read it.
It looks like a patent.
It
It
does.
is a
Bounty-
patent. for,
Bounty
160
land.
acres.
So this
Yeah,
is,
Bounty land.
Yeah, that's what it looks
yeah,
like.
yeah. Do you see where it says Bounty Land right there?
Mhm.
160 acres. This is a
Yeah.
War of 1812 soldier who got
Ah.
160 acres of bounty land.
Mhm.
So these are something I work with all the time as well. War of 1812 bounty land. These very colorful
Yeah, I
looking
was gonna say,
certificates,
yeah.
very ornate. These are from usually the 1850s, 1860s, which the fact that it's in color and
Yeah.
so elaborate like that is amazing for that time period. I have a guess as to why these are so elaborate, because you would take this, you could go to the land office and redeem it for your 160 acres of bounty land.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever told me why it looks like this, but I have a good guess that I don't think they wanted them counterfeited. That if
Oh.
you could counterfeit these, you could go claim all kinds of bounty
Oh
land.
gosh, you're
But
right.
what kind of person in 1860 without having technology is going to be able to reproduce that image right there?
It's very
Yeah.
tricky.
So that's my guess. I think it makes sense, but
it makes sense.
It does. And they are
but
created
if someone
about
comes up with a different explanation, I'd be open to it. But that's what I think is happening. And so you can see the name of the soldier here,
Yeah.
Charles Hopper, a private, Captain Richardson's company, Tennessee Militia, War of 1812. Yeah,
Very
the
cool.
volunteers, now, 1812. You know why we
Yeah.
were called the Tennessee is called the Volunteers. That's our nickname. It's
Mhm.
because we
Yep.
sent more men to fight during the War of 1812. That's why we got our nickname, the Volunteer State.
did
Wow.
not know that. So
Very,
he must have been one.
very nice. Thanks, Melissa.
Oh yeah.
You never know what you're going to learn on GenFriends.
I've lived here since I was
there you
10
go.
years old. We're taught that in Tennessee history,
Yeah.
7th grade.
That was very
So
cool. That was very
That's
cool.
something else I was working with,
Okay.
just today.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Very cool. I know Bernice does a lot of homestead records, so I thought Bernice knows what that is.
Oh, yes.
Very cool. Well, does anybody else have any other questions? This has been really fun.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. It's just
Yeah.
about another record group. Have you pulled any records from the Southern Claims Commission?
I love the Southern Claims Commission records.
once I had one request for that one time, and I couldn't find the soldier that they were or not the soldier, but person they were looking for in that book. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with those, but I've looked at the books once.
Yeah, I love those, Bernice, because, you know, they had to claim, right, that they were always loyal to the Union, and I love it. They can,
I love those records.
I know, because they're so hokey, but they give you lots of information, but you know daggum well that those South Carolina soldiers were not always loyal.
They were not loyal.
No, they were not. They just wanted that money. But that's another record group that gives you so much information, especially about the formerly enslaved. Yeah, because they would give that testimony and they would say who their enslaver was and what they did during the war and what things were taken and what they wanted back.
And they would out the person.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
loyal.
Exactly. So I love those records. Those are great records too. So fun records. So if you haven't looked into those and you've got people that fought in the the Confederacy, check and see if they claimed that they were loyal.
And they
You
would
work with them very
inflate,
much,
and they
Bernice?
would inflate the value of
The
the
value of
belongings.
everything. Right. But like I said, you can get all these records, you can get so much good information from them, you know, and so we're grateful that they created them to begin with, even if they weren't telling the truth.
Bernice, have you worked with those records very much?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
Those are good records.
Oh, yes, I love those records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are good records. Anybody else got a question or a comment or anything? Just we're grateful for your work. We're grateful for what you
Yes.
do.
I'm grateful that people keep me in business. So it's a win-win.
It is.
Paid to go to the National Archives. So how cool is that?
Yeah. What's your job? I get to go to the National Archives and pull records.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just a
Wonderful.
pleasant place to go. I mean, I
Yeah.
look at it as my happy place.
I'll
I
bet
used to
you
go
do.
all the time.
Yeah.
And
I've been there one
I had a
time.
cat, I
Lucky
would
enough to be
sleep
there
there.
once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was wonderful. I hope to maybe go back again one day. So it was a wonderful time to be there. And I got my little researcher card that I used one time, that one day when I was there.
I know that little researcher card, it's like such a trophy.
Yes, it is. It is. So
I'm
wonderful
a
to have
professional researcher.
it for one day and one day only. So, it's a great
I have
place.
one more thing I can show
Oh, you
you.
do?
It's not,
Okay.
Good.
Fabulous.
it's not something I got at the archives, but it's a question that I get all the time that
Okay.
I might be able to answer for someone who's watching that's asking,
Sure.
how do I even know if my ancestor is a pension file?
Oh,
Because
go.
here's the best way to tell. If you find one of these records, one of these cards
Yes.
on Ancestry or on something like this on Fold 3,
Yes.
this is a pension index card, meaning this soldier, Oliver Mann, received a Civil War pension.
Yeah.
His widow, Lucetta, also received a widow's pension. The National Archives still uses the same filing system. So that over 100 years ago, I could go and request file 222370, and they're going to bring me that pension
They're gonna
file.
bring you that pension file.
So if you find one of these, your ancestor probably has a pension file at the National Archives.
So cool. That's a great tip. That's great because I'm sure somebody's going to have that question. Well, how would I even know? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And how do you know if that is going to be an actual pension file that you can touch versus it's already been scanned and you're just going to be able to look at the digital copy?
All right.
Is
Let
there
me
a
go
number
back and I'll show
series,
you.
like a master series of numbers that you would know before you got there?
Yes, that's a good question. And I'm going to amend my answer to the question you asked earlier about a misconception. Because one misconception is that these are all online, and they're not.
Wow.
So they started digitizing these, they've stopped. It's not happening anymore. They started with the widows and minors pensions. They didn't do the invalid pensions. They started doing them in numerical order. This is the file number that they take into consideration. All these numbers don't really matter as much. This one here is the one that matters. They started with file number 1 and 2 and then 3, and they got all the way up to 148,100, and then they stopped. So this number down here in the widows or minors area is higher than 148,000. It's not online. If it's lower, it's probably online.
Oh, that's a good question. Great
That's
answer.
a good tip.
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
And
I'll say one
sometimes
thing
I
though.
used to work on this project before it stopped. And one of the things that people will want to know is that you can go to Fold 3 and
Mhm.
find those digitized files.
Mhm.
But you're right, Brian, we stopped, which means that all those records have not been digitized.
Yeah.
Also at the bottom where you see remarks, if you see some other numbers on here, the file may not be there at all. And I have gone through several letter writing campaigns to try to find a pension file. I've gone to Veterans Administration, I've gone to St. Louis, the file is totally missing.
Oh.
And so, you know, keep in mind that even though you might find an index card, it still might not be there.
That would be my luck. Should I have had anybody who could get a Civil War pension, that would be my luck. Is the file was
One
missing.
rule of thumb, if you don't know the file number and you're like, I wonder if this is on Fold 3. This is not an exact science, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. Like I said, they started with number 1 and then 2. The reason pension number 1 got number 1, it was because it was the very first pension approved. The reason it was approved so early is because that was a soldier that died during the war. So logically speaking, all of those really early pensions that got digitized have such low numbers because a lot of them are soldiers that died in the war or shortly after. So if your soldier lived a long life, it's probably not one of them that they got to on Fold 3. If it's a guy that died in the war, there's a good chance that his might be on Fold 3.
Oh, that's a good tip too. Mary, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so I don't know whether they still have it, but when I was back at the National Archives, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, probably, they had the Discovery Hub, and I got my husband's ancestors, the invalid and the widow's pension, and I scanned them in the Discovery Hub. And so if someone does that, then they pull those from Access as well. So mine was not a number below 150,000, but it has, because I scanned it. And so you can find it on Fold 3, I think, and has my name associated with it. Just thank you to Mary Roddy for
so if somebody in the family that maybe you didn't even know, you know, somebody's been there, you might
right.
find it. Okay,
that's a good point, Mary. That's a good point. Going into the hub, those people that did scan those records, they would be up there. They're called citizen archivists.
Yeah,
well, Mary, I'm gonna look for a file under your name.
Well,
and there was good stuff in that file, man.
Since you brought up Fold 3, I have a couple of questions about Fold 3. When you say that the widows and was it not orphans, but is it orphans? Yeah. Minor. Those are all totally digitized. Is that what you said? No. Okay.
The first 148,000 are.
Okay. And then, so does that, so what about the invalid then? What number does it go up to?
It didn't do
at all. Okay, gotcha. Well, so my question on Fold 3 then is that the ones that are digitized and on Fold 3, is it your experience that they are the complete files? The reason I ask that is because I have gotten a file off of Fold 3 and I've gotten a file from the National Archives, and there's been more in the file in the National Archives than was on Fold 3.
All right. Okay. I honestly can't speak to that on my own experience because once it's on Fold 3, they don't let you pull that file. So I don't have any experience comparing them.
Okay.
I've asked about that. So I gotten questions about those and like the Revolutionary War pensions, where someone wants to know, this is on Fold 3, but I want to know if there's more in the actual packet.
Right.
I
they
don't know. They've said that they've done the whole packet. I have no reason to think they don't do that, but I can't tell you for sure because I don't have any real experience on that.
It's been several years ago, so they may have not done, not pulled them back then or something, because I got something off of Fold 3 and then I went ahead just on a whim and requested it from the National Archives, and there was not a lot, but there was more in the National Archives file that was not digitized.
And they let you do it, even though it was
I guess maybe it was before they stopped it or something. I don't know, because I was able to get it.
And I have heard, I don't know if this is true. Well, no, actually, I do know it's true because the one time I was at the National Archives, this happened to somebody. They were told you can't have that because it's been digitized. And she showed them the digitized copy and said, but I can't read this. It didn't copy correctly. And they brought her the file.
That's true.
So,
Yeah, they'll make exceptions if
Yeah.
it's for a good reason like that.
yeah, yeah. So that's a
One of
good
the things you will find though with that digitized file, it's put in order. That's
That's
one of the things that as a
Well, there's a
volunteer,
part. Yeah.
we put it all together. You know, we had a
Well,
certain
thank you
order
for
we
your
had.
service with
Yes,
that,
thank
Bernice.
you.
I did not know that. You put those like in
Yes.
chronological order on
Yes,
the
yes, we
within
had
the
a certain
individual
thing. We
pension
had to
files.
start with the brief and they worked us all the way through how we had to put that file together.
Oh, how
That must take a long
Yeah.
time to do
yeah.
that.
Well, yeah.
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 What a bonus for
Yeah.
the person reading it, because it's
Sure.
harder. I think it's harder. I love the fact that these things are digitized, but with these thicker files, sometimes it's harder to get through them online. If you have the stack of paper in front of you, it's a little bit easier to go through. So that's nice to know. So you're not going, okay, which one is which and which, how does this go together? Do I need to print it and put it all together and, in chronological order, or is it? So that's good to know. Thank you for saying that. That's
I
great.
did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. This is GenFriends for you, right? You never know what's gonna happen, what you might learn. Anybody else got anything? This has been so much fun. So much fun to have you. We appreciate it so much. And for everybody out there, Brian does presentations as well.
Yep.
So if you need somebody to speak for your genealogy club, his all of his information will be linked to this video and to our blog post. And if you want somebody to go and find your records at the archives, well, he can do that for you too. So we're glad to have
Happy
you.
to
Thank you.
help.
Thank you for your
Yes,
service. Because like I
I
said, for a
appreciate the
lot of us,
invitation.
it's too far, it's too far and it's cheaper to hire you to
Yeah.
do it than, get on the plane and get over there, get a hotel in DC, because Bernice is not going to let us all come stay with her.
No.
I have some extra rooms.
Oh, that's so funny. Anyway, thank you for joining us tonight. We sure appreciate it.
I appreciate the invitation. Yeah, it was fun.
It's fun. Thank you for the examples that you showed us too. And now I want to go and see what else I can find and maybe get you to look for me. So wouldn't be Civil War, but there's other wars.
And those were things that I only just found today. So imagine
Yeah.
if you start pulling records there, you may find.
Exactly. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thank you guys so much. And with that, we will see you next time on GenFriends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.